Our story begins with Sakura, an expert martial artist and the most popular girl in school, who on one fateful night witnesses a boy seemingly burning people to death with blue flames. Upon seeing this, she immediately gets off the bus and alerts a nearby policeman about what she saw. But when they arrive at the scene of the crime, there seems to be no trace of anything having occurred. But Sakura remains convinced of what she saw. The next day at school, a new transfer student named Ōgami is assigned to her class. All the girls immediately begin fawning over him, and it doesn't take long for Ōgami to become popular. Everyone seems to be charmed by him, except for Sakura, who recognizes Ōgami as the same boy she saw burning people the previous night. Later that day, Sakura confronts Ōgami about him being a murderer, while the rest of the school mistakenly believes that she's confessing to him. Ōgami, however, feigns ignorance to Sakura's questions and claims he was busy at his part-time job the previous night. Seeing that Ōgami has no burn marks, Sakura feels compelled to believe him, as she begins to wonder if what she saw was truly real. Ōgami then leaves, but tells Sakura that he hopes they can become friends. Later that day, Ōgami receives a phone call asking if he's made a decision on what to do with Sakura, to which he replies that he'll just have to eliminate her. The next day, while visiting a stray dog in the park, Sakura witnesses a criminal gang attacking a defenseless homeless man. When she intervenes, she realizes that they are members of the ruthless G-Falcon gang. Due to their falcon-shaped tattoos, she is able to hold them off with her martial arts for quite a while, until she is eventually stunned with a taser and kicked repeatedly. The dog she fed earlier tries to protect Sakura, but the gang members nearly kill it by kicking it around. Just when Sakura herself is about to be killed, Ōgami shows up seemingly out of nowhere, which surprises the criminals. Upon seeing how bruised and beaten the dog is, Ōgami deems that it is beyond saving, and puts it out of its misery himself, much to Sakura's horror. He then turns to the gang members and burns one of them alive as he recites his motto: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, an evil for evil. He then offers the remaining criminals a choice: turn themselves into the police or die. The gang members choose death, however, and charge at Ōgami, who in response uses his powers to summon blue flames and eradicates them all. Ōgami then walks up to the horrified Sakura and tells her he lied when he said he wanted them to be friends, as he sets her on fire. Surprisingly, Sakura wakes up in her room the following morning, completely unharmed, but confused about how she's still alive. At school, Sakura grows highly cautious of Ōgami, despite him acting as if nothing transpired the night before whilst among their peers. However, when Ōgami begins following Sakura around school and spying on her, she decides to avoid her best friend in an attempt to protect her from Ōgami. Elsewhere, a man named Yuki is given a picture of his next opponent by someone in a cat costume who refers to Yuki as number 3. After school, Sakura takes Ōgami to a populated area with lots of witnesses so Ōgami can't use his powers, and tries to reason with him about killing those men the night before. However, Ōgami explains that those men deserve to die, as they were evil, and that he is the necessary evil that takes care of society's trash. Sakura disagrees with Ōgami's sense of justice, and is not able to accept how he can commit such acts without feeling any emotion. In response, Ōgami further explains that he does not exist, and is not bound by human laws and morality, as he is the sixth codebreaker, a person who passes judgment on evildoers via means that would be considered evil to the rest of the world. To prove that he can't be reasoned with, Ōgami tries to burn Sakura in the middle of the crowded area, but she flees from fright. However, he grabs her hand before she can escape, and tells her that he will keep an eye on her and kill anyone who learns about his true identity. To make sure that he does not kill any more people, Sakura promises to keep an eye on him as well. This makes Ōgami laugh a bit, before he reiterates that he will kill anyone, anywhere, at any time, without exception, and that neither her nor any witnesses are capable of stopping him. Later that day, after Sakura's returned home, Ōgami receives a call from a mysterious woman wondering why Sakura is not dead yet, to which Ōgami replies that she must not be killed yet, as she is a rare person who cannot be burnt by his flames, something he's never seen before. Elsewhere that same day, Yuki encounters Hitomi, the man he was tasked with eliminating, who Yuki refers to as number 1. As the men prepare to fight, Yuki recites his motto: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a requiem of fury for evil. Yuki then proceeds to attack Hitomi with sound waves, but is stopped by a man named Yukihina, who has the ability to control ice, and uses it to put an end to the fight. The next day, Sakura goes to school with Ōgami and finds her locker stuffed with love letters from fellow students. Due to Sakura and Ōgami's desires to keep an eye on each other, students have begun to misunderstand their relationship, and believe that they are dating. This jealousy quickly turns into violence, but Sakura prevents the situation from escalating further out of fear of Ōgami using his powers. Elsewhere, a mysterious blonde boy receives a call ordering him to work with Ōgami. Later that day, Ōgami gives Sakura a puppy of the dog that tried to protect her as a gift, which makes her happy, but remembering how the dog died just brings her to tears. Afterwards, Sakura goes with Ōgami to a local Yakuza office, where he is offered a job to sell illegal goods for them. However, Ōgami refuses their offer and burns all the Yakuza members instead, along with 2 corrupt policemen who were there as well. Ōgami then goes to a car waiting outside the Yakuza office, with a corrupt chief of police inside, who immediately attempts to flee upon noticing Ōgami, but despite being wounded, he pursues the corrupt chief of police in order to bring him to justice. Suddenly, Toki, the mysterious blondie from earlier and the 4th codebreaker, appears out of nowhere and blows up the car that the chief of police was in, by using his powers of magnetism. The next day, Ōgami appears before Eden, the Codebreaker Policy Governance Board, where he is given his next job to assassinate a politician named Tabata. Elsewhere, Sakura runs into Toki outside her house, who walks with her to school. However, Ōgami suddenly appears and immediately begins to fight Toki until Sakura stops them by grabbing their wrists. Toki then leaves shortly after, and Sakura and Ōgami head to school together. After school, Ōgami and Toki team up to go on a mission together, and Sakura accidentally ends up tagging along. After using Toki's powers to break into a compound, they find out that this place is housing a government research facility for special abilities. And after dealing with the normal security guards, Ōgami and Toki engage in battle with 2 guards wearing unusual backpacks, which grants them the ability to manipulate wind and water. During their battle, however, the 2 guards are overwhelmed by Ōgami and Toki, and are forced to retreat when their backpacks suddenly run dry. Rather than chase them, Ōgami and Toki decide to continue with the mission. Inside the facility, Sakura learns that the Codebreakers are actually a government agency run directly under the command of the Prime Minister of Japan. This facility houses kids with special abilities hooked up to machines for close monitoring, and the lower levels of the facility are used for even more inhumane experiments that are performed on the children. Tabata, the politician that Ōgami had been ordered to kill, is revealed to be the head of this research facility. Suddenly, the 2 guards return and resume their fight with Ōgami and Toki, who both quickly discover that the backpacks each contain a child with special abilities inside. After killing the guards, the 2 children that were inside the backpacks are finally put to rest. Ōgami then goes to kill Tabata, but moments before he does, Tabata's crippled daughter, Chisa, appears. It turns out that Tabata had performed such inhumane experiments, in hopes of finding suitable transplants for Chisa, who also has special abilities. Sakura tries to convince Ōgami not to kill Tabata by protecting him with her body, but he spits in the face of her mercy by trying to attack Ōgami with a scalpel, giving Ōgami no choice but to kill him. Chisa, mourning her father's death, attempts to use her powers to hurt Ōgami, but is unable to harm him. In response, Ōgami gives her permission to someday take revenge on him, and walks away. Meanwhile, Toki finds out that Hitomi, Codebreaker number 1, is the real mastermind behind this research project. The remaining children are then transported to another research facility, and Chisa receives medical attention. Sometime later, while Toki has lunch with his father, the Prime Minister of Japan, he is reminded that he became a codebreaker in order to keep his sister away from danger. Elsewhere, while Sakura and Ōgami head to school together, they run into Codebreaker number 5, who is nicknamed Prince, despite being a girl. She gives Ōgami strict orders to protect Sakura at all costs. At school, Ōgami notices that the class is acting strangely, which causes him to suspect that Sakura has exposed his secret as a code breaker. However, it turns out that the class was actually just preparing a welcome party for Ōgami. At that same time, Toki is seen collapsing in pain in an alley somewhere else, and the Prime Minister is informed that a total of 43 agents have gone missing in search of Hitomi. Back at the party, the school is attacked by the 43 missing agents, whose dead bodies have been reanimated thanks to Hitomi's ability to manipulate electricity. While fighting the dead agents, Ōgami momentarily collapses due to using too much of his powers. Suddenly, Miss Konda, a teacher at their school, reveals herself as an agent of Eden assigned to assist Ōgami and helps fight off the agents. Yuki also appears shortly after to assist them in fending off the attack. Masaomi, a classmate of Sakura and Ōgami in Codebreaker number 2, joins the fight as well and successfully defeats the agents using his light manipulation. Despite winning this fight, Toki is still shown collapsed, but is now in the form of a child. Later, Sakura learns that Ōgami's collapse has caused him to enter his lost form, due to the overuse of his powers. This lost form state will last 24 hours, and the symptoms vary for each code breaker. In Ōgami's case, this state causes him to suffer from hypothermia. In an effort to help, Sakura volunteers her house as a secure location for Ōgami to recover. When Sakura brings the gang there, they are welcomed by her father, who turns out to be the head of a highly respected Yakuza clan called the Kizakura. When they arrive at the guest house, it's revealed that Toki is already there, but is in his lost form that causes him to age regress, which explains his childlike appearance. While Ōgami is resting, the others have a feast together and celebrate along with the other Yakuza members. At night, Masaomi informs Toki that Hitomi might be targeting both Ōgami and Sakura, but he has no idea why. The next morning, Prince is ordered to go to Sakura's house to provide support for both Ōgami and Toki. Suddenly, Hitomi raids Sakura's house in order to kidnap her, and the Codebreakers do their best to fight back against his electrical attacks. Hitomi then unleashes his full power against them, but Sakura jumps in front of his attack and is surprisingly unharmed. Hitomi doesn't seem too fazed by this, however, as he explains that this attack was just a decoy to gather all the Codebreakers in one area, thus leaving an opening for Yukihina to kidnap the Prime Minister. After Hitomi flees, the Codebreakers discuss what their next plan of action should be. Toki leaves during their conversation, however, as he has no interest in rescuing his father. While the Yakuza members who were injured during Hitomi's attack are having their wounds treated, Sakura finds Ōgami looking through her family photo album. It's revealed that Sakura's parents adopted her as a child, after finding her outside on their doorstep one night with blood splattered all over her, and did their best to raise her as a normal child despite her unusual surroundings. Meanwhile, Yuki, who has turned into a cat as part of his lost form, reminisces with Prince about when Hitomi used to be a good guy. When Toki returns, Sakura and the other Codebreakers head out in search of Hitomi and the Prime Minister. Later on, Masaomi meets with Prince at a bridge and immediately attacks her when she figures out that he is a part of Hitomi's plan. However, Yuki witnesses Masaomi attack Prince from afar. After his fight with Prince, Masaomi appears in front of Sakura and tricks her into following him, leading her directly to Hitomi's hideout, where the Prime Minister is also being held hostage. Masaomi hands Sakura over as a gesture of goodwill, in order to join sides with Hitomi. Shortly after, all the Codebreakers receive anonymous messages detailing Hitomi's location. Yuki then rejoins the group and informs Ōgami of Masaomi's betrayal, and the two proceed to Hitomi's hideout together. Once there, Yuki holds off Masaomi while Ōgami continues forward to confront Hitomi and hopefully rescue Sakura. Once Sakura is freed, Hitomi shows his clock collection on the wall and explains that each clock is stopped at a time when a former Codebreaker was killed. Hitomi further explains that he plans to execute the Prime Minister, but he first bombs the city full of civilians as a spectacle to expose Codebreakers, in order for them to become recognized as great heroes rather than dangerous outcasts. However, Ōgami disagrees with Hitomi's cause and burns all the clocks. But as Ōgami attempts to attack Hitomi, Yukihina arrives out of nowhere and intervenes by taking the Prime Minister with him. Although Ōgami is unable to do anything since his flames cannot melt Yukihina's ice, Toki arrives just in time to save Ōgami and Sakura from a barrage of ice. As the hideout begins to collapse, everyone leaves. But when they accidentally split up, Sakura enters the car with Hitomi, Masaomi, and Yukihina inside, hoping to prevent them from killing the Prime Minister. In a flashback, we see that when Hitomi was 16 years old, he was inaugurated as Codebreaker number 6, and due to his excellence at his job, he was considered for a promotion. 4 years later, Hitomi's unnamed partner, who was Codebreaker number 5 at the time, was killed during an operation, and his watch stopped working the exact moment he died. Hitomi was then promoted as the new Codebreaker number 5, but he was still greatly troubled by his partner's death. When Hitomi was eventually promoted to Codebreaker number 1, he was tasked with training the future Codebreakers, which included Yuki, Toki, Prince, and Ōgami. However, Hitomi took concern with Ōgami's primary focus of eliminating evil without thought of any consequences. Hitomi later told Ōgami that their purpose should be protecting the powerless, and not simply killing the wicked. Sometime later, Masaomi informed Hitomi that Codebreakers could die if they overused their own powers numerous times, which was something Eden had kept hidden from them. So after years of being treated by Eden like nothing more than a tool for killing, Hitomi silently vowed to get revenge on the very organization that taught him how to kill. Back in the present, Hitomi announces to the public from the top of the Tokyo Sky Tower that he will kill the Prime Minister and 50,000 other civilians across Japan when the timer runs out. Meanwhile, the Codebreakers continue to search for Hitomi, but are unsuccessful. As bombs continue to detonate throughout Japan, the Codebreakers, the Japanese government, and the Kizakura Yakuza clan all receive anonymous emails detailing the locations of the bombs and of Hitomi. Toki and Miss Konda set off to Sky Tower, while Yuki goes out to search for and disable as many bombs as he can. Ōgami arrives at the Sky Tower first in order to rescue Sakura, but Hitomi catches him before he can. Ōgami fills his blade with his blue flames and charges at Hitomi. The two engage in an intense battle, but Ōgami's blue flames are soon overwhelmed by Hitomi's electricity. As Sakura manages to free herself, Hitomi reveals to them that the Prime Minister attempted to have him killed in order to prevent him from exposing the code breakers. Hitomi then states his desire to make a world where people with special abilities can live happily and free, and not as government dogs. Meanwhile, Toki and Miss Konda are stopped by Masaomi, who faces Toki in a fierce duel of light powers versus magnetic powers. At that same time, the Japanese government and the Kizakura Yakuza clan begin to evacuate locations with bombs, but they are unfortunately too short on personnel to help everywhere. Meanwhile, Hitomi reveals to Ōgami, who is standing on the brink of defeat, that the people that Ōgami has killed thus far on behalf of Eden were simply ones that had helped Hitomi in one way or another rather than purely evil individuals. Despite this, Ōgami refuses to join Hitomi and promises to protect the innocent until the very end. However, Ōgami goes into his lost form when he tries to attack Hitomi once more. Sakura desperately tries to protect him from Hitomi, who grabs her by the throat. But when the timer reaches 0, no detonation occurs. This is thanks to Masaomi, who told Yuki where the bombs were located. Back at the tower, Masaomi confronts Hitomi and tells him that his plan has failed. And just as Hitomi is about to reveal his final trump card, Sky Tower is covered in Prince's shadow ability, and the rest of the code breakers arrive to stop Hitomi, who continues to try and rationalize his cause. Meanwhile, Toki reluctantly rescues his father after threatening to kill him. Ōgami then re-enters the fight by removing his thumb ring, which causes his power to rise exponentially. And as they fight, Ōgami reminisces about his first training session with Hitomi. Surprisingly, Ōgami's blue flames manage to absorb Hitomi's strongest electricity blasts, which results in both of them collapsing. And when Hitomi gets back up in an attempt to continue his plan, he is swiftly knocked back down by Ōgami. As he lies defeated and says his last words to all the code breakers, Hitomi encourages them to make themselves public as the ones who defeated him. However, the Prime Minister appears suddenly and says that their identities must remain secret. An enraged Hitomi attempts to kill the Prime Minister, but Hitomi's powers begin to eat him from the inside out, and he dies from the overuse of his powers. As Ōgami holds a dead Hitomi in his arms, he thinks that Hitomi got the justice he deserved in the end. Despite this, the other codebreakers still mourn his death. Meanwhile, Toki overhears the public crediting the police department for disabling the bombs and killing Hitomi, with no mentions of the codebreakers. Later on, Masaomi and the Prime Minister discuss how they succeeded in having Ōgami battle Hitomi to draw out his true power, and how they will need to use Sakura to extinguish his flames if he ever goes out of control. Masaomi then smiles as the Prime Minister begins to cough up blood. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all again in the next one.